Hey everybody, this is Ursus doing a guest deck profile of Murakumo for Hive Mind Vanguard. So yeah, I've been playing Murakumo pretty much the entirety of the game. So let's just get right into it. Obviously, an Excel clan. Starting off with our grade zeros, we have Stealth Beast Cat Devil. Started off as a crit, now a starter. Pretty nice, standard draw. Next, going into the lineup, 4 heal, because heals are pretty important. Kind of need those. Good source of shield. Alright. Next is 4 and 6 crit. Honestly, I feel with this deck, it's really important to push your opponent back, even though it can dirtle pretty hard. I like to play kind of conservatively with the deck and try to use as minimal cards from hand as possible. So I try not to commit too much from my hand to field, even though I can superior call a lot. So this really helps with being able to conserve. And then the 6 draw. It's really important to have your combo pieces. Zambaku, if you already know what he does, can actually function without being able to call his units. So if you have them in hand, they're actually a lot safer there. Once again, there's a lot of, with the draw perfs, it's easier to save a lot of room in your grade 1 lineup or wherever else you want to put it. And despite being a superior call clan, it's just nice having extra hand advantage. So yeah, 6 draw. To the great ones. I feel like this is kind of standard 4 million rat. I feel like you can probably put them down to 3 if you want. It's really fine. It does mess with your counterblast for Zambaku, but it does fill your field early if you feel like you need to rush. If you ride into something else, say Musashi, it's also fills your field for that. Alright, next up, we have the 3 Amatsu Snipe. This one completely depends on the build. He's really consistent in this build, but in Mandala, I feel like he does a little less work. I'm running him at 3. He's just a consistent 12k attacker when you need him to be, 12k booster if you can get him there. Just really good. Next, 2 Shijimaru. I feel like he has the same problem as Amatsu Snipe. It's a lot better in Mandala, but yeah, if you can fill out your field, he really helps push your numbers. He can make your right arresters or left arresters 12k. That way you won't have to use alternative skills to make them bigger. If your rights end up somewhere not on an Excel circle, he helps push you a little further. This clan's full of 7Ks and it hurts my feelings. Last, I have Turbulent Edge at 3. So as my alternate, I have Mandala Lord, and I feel like being able to efficiently run his engine in the deck, despite me not running that many copies of him, is really good for when you can't ride into Zambaku. And even in some cases where you know you have a very efficient rush into your first grade 3 ride. I run him at 3 just to make sure I can efficiently copy him with Mandala. If you want, you can replace him with a copy of Shiji, but I wouldn't recommend it. Also because he's in 8k and you kind of would like that early first ride. For grade 2s, the obvious left arrestor, the first key piece for Zambaku. The Soul Blast 1, if you have another arrestor, he gets 5k. You can pretty much place him anywhere and he can hit even Force Cleanse by himself. It's really nice. This one you have to run at 4 no matter what. It's such a good card and such a key piece that you have to run at 4. Unlike the next one, which is pretty arguable, but I'll explain why. 3, right arrestor. Now, most people will say that he is a staple at 4 because he's so important and such a key piece. I do agree with that to a point. I only agree to the point where he's a key piece. It's the fact of you being able to see him for Zanbaku that is important, not his lockdown effect. The counterblast 2 is really, really rough, and on average, you're only going to be doing him using his skill once. So I think as long as you can keep him at least one in hand and one in deck, you should be fine. If something unfortunate happens, that's why I also run the Mandala backup, but I think he is safe at 3. Next, 3 Fushimi. Really good for sniping off really annoying boosters. Definitely in Kagura and Shadow Paladin. 14k attacker, so he's just a consistent attacker for you, considering that you use a lot of resources and you don't want to always be using left arrestor. And right arrestor alone can't hit by himself, and the other card I'll be showing you next also can't hit by himself. So it's nice to have at least one of your 2s be able to hit without any sort of cost. Next and lastly for grade 2s, the 2 copy of Imitation Model. The same reason for Turbulent Edge. He's just to help the Mandala engine go off. If you have these skulking around, or if you have a Turbulent Edge or extra copies of Mandala, he still functions as a booster. So yeah, that helps you with things like right arrestor or left arrestor if you can't pay his cost. Musashi if you have him sitting on a rearguard circle. Other than that, he's mainly just there for calling out interceptors when you ride Mandala. I find it really helpful. It gives you a lot of defensive options anyway, which is nice in an Excel clan. I wish I could run him at 3, but the lineup's kind of tight as is with shifting things around like I did. So yeah, I think he's working fine at 2, other than when I draw both of them. But anyway, next for grade 3s, the obvious for Zanbaku. Yeah, it is a Zanbaku deck, so you have to run him at 4, unfortunately. Yeah, a lot of people really only focus on the lockdown, the full lockdown where your opponent cannot stand or cannot ride. I do find so much merit in just denying your opponent the ability to be able to ride a new grade 3. It's really good in denying them protect markers, really good in denying them extra force markers as well, especially against Kagura where you're terrified of waterfall. It's really nice being able to sit there for 2 or 3 turns, and once you actually have to deal with the waterfall, it's only 40k. It's really nice. Because I only run the 7 arresters, I really have to be careful of how I use him and when I use him. Sometimes I do use him early just to put extra pressure, even though it does waste one of my counterblasts and allows my opponent to damage denial me. Other than that, there's not much to say. There is a very specific order that you kind of have to play this out, which I can show you after I go through my 3s. But yeah, there's not too much to go through with him. Next, 3 Musashi, Twin Sword Musashi. This card's really good. Yeah, no, he's just really good. So he's a 17k attacker, 27 on an Excel circle if you have more rear guards than your opponent. And Battle Door effect on it is really good. I think this is one of the freest Battle Door skills in the game right now. And it just puts so much pressure on your opponent. Being in an Excel clan and being able to just constantly rip cards out of your opponent's hand is amazing. Especially after locking them down with Zanbaku and the arresters. It's so good. I usually just have him sit in my hand. I wait until I Zanbaku them and I just start swinging. And next turn, if they want to, it gives me a chance to actually be able to defend him on rear guard since you're only defending him from rear guards. So yeah, I run him at 3. I want I would switch him with the two Mondolos, but I feel like being able to see him as well is really important. And then two Mondolo Lords. I wish I could play at 3, but I can't, and I don't want to run 9 3s for this. Well, not 9, 10 3s for this. So, yeah, he's really good early, and he's really good late. Early on, it's really good for rushing. He can always make a consistent field. Like if you run the pure build, you'll realize that he has a really good way of shifting around your field to be able to hit numbers. I just really, really love this card, and he's a really good backup for Zanbaku. I really wish I could run him higher, but for now I just have to run him at 2. His engine really works well because it doesn't require you to do much. Yikes. Turbulent Edge itself functions as its own mandala, and it turns himself into a mandala lord. So even if you don't ride him, you can still use his skill. You have essentially 4 copies of this card with imitation, and the deck just works well. It's really, I found that games that I don't ride Zanbaku, it's not an issue when I have to ride into him. The only games I have issues with is when I ride Musashi. Yeah, so with Zanbaku, let's say this is your field, you're just now riding. Your opponent has you at 3 open counterblasts, so there is a very specific order you want to do this. If you can, what you want to do is you want to place a left arrestor on radar circle, use skill, use Zanbaku's skill, call the right arrestor, and then use right arrestor skill. There are other ways you can do this, like if sometimes I will brick this and I will just straight up call the right arrestor from hand. And if I have extra copies of it, sometimes I'll have like both in hand and I'll call both and then call the right arrestor. Other ways to do it, for right arrestor, actually sometimes I will call a right arrestor, call another right arrestor, and then use Zanbaku's skill to call a left arrestor. It's kind of limiting and it uses a lot of resources, but as long as you can get the lockdown, it works. It denies your opponent about one good turn before you really have to deal with them. It's really good against, I'd say, shadows, even though they can still clear your field with PBD. Definitely good against cogs where you can deny them riding another waterfall. I haven't exactly seen how it fares against DI, but I feel like it still has the good matchup. Pale Moon, not an issue. Usually I was really afraid originally how this deck would do against Excel, because being rushed really hard has always tended to hurt Murakumo decks. And I found that it's actually not as bad as you think. And honestly, I think that's about all to cover it. I think that's about it. So this is Ursus as a guest for Hive Mind Vanguard. See you.